Jim, first of all, if you don't mind sharing, how has the Enneagram affected you personally? There's a reason why you got into the work you're doing right now.
I think from a very early age, I was fascinated by personality. I was fascinated by how people were different because I just felt at odds with my world. I felt kind of out of place. So I felt like I had this deep desire to belong, but the inability to alter myself or change myself to just fit in. I wasn't willing to do it. I didn't know how to do it. And so I think I came to it for the same reasons a lot of people do. Is like, I want to understand, like, for the same reasons a lot of people do. Is like, I want to understand, like, what's wrong with me and what's wrong with them, because that seemed to be the only two explanations in my head when I'd run into a conflict. What's wrong with me, or what's wrong with you, right? And one of the biggest things that it helped me with personally, if we're on this subject, is I would say in my marriage. I am very, very different from my wife. We come from different ends of the spectrum. And one of the breakthroughs that happened for us, honestly, is we were learning about the types and we were learning about our two types. And I remember sitting in bed one night and apologizing to her and just saying, I'm so sorry that for the first 10 years of our marriage, I treated you like you needed to be more like me. As far as what it helped me personally is it broke down that moralizing of my perspective, moralizing that I am somehow normal and everyone else is some deviation of normal. And especially in my own house, where there were certain things that I just couldn't understand why you would do that, or why wouldn't you make this decision, and so many relationships have that kind of dynamic. And I just remember that being a breakthrough in our marriage when I was able to do that. Like, she's never going to be as like intense or as driven or as many interests, or she's just not going to be like that. And the way that I pushed her in the first decade of our marriage wasn't fair to her, and it wasn't really fair to our relationship, wasn't fair to me. So I'd say when it comes to like how it's helped me personally, this specific area was a huge breakthrough for us.
One of the things I'll get into in this series is how we idolize, which leads to personalize, which leads to villainize. So if I idolize my spouse, you're going to give me what only God can, and then you don't do that, I personalize that. And then when I personalize that, I villainize you.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is people do it in one of two directions. They either idolize externally, like you have something, and then I need you to fulfill something. So I often describe dating as when we get together with this person, we've had this invisible journal that we've written in invisible ink our entire lives. And we meet this person, we're like, this is your job description. And some people like then put that on the other person. But I think for me, I came from the other perspective. I idolized my perspective and I needed you to be more like me. So some people are more external, but then for some of us, I think it's a lot more internal. And that's the thing to overcome. And it can go either direction.
The reason that I personally have benefited from the Enneagram is, as a 3, it gave me a clear path of growth. Where do you recommend people start? Because you got a lot of people at SouthBrook right now who haven't heard of the Enneagram yet. They're just now being introduced.
Right. So I think everyone sort of has to start with them. You have to understand a little bit more about you are. Because when it comes to relationships, the first thing that my wife and I always tell couples when we sit down with them, we say, we have good news for you. You will never understand each other. And why that's good news is because think about when you first got together, you had this, who are you? I want to know. We stay up late and we talk. I'm so curious, because curiosity is the fuel of relationship. It draws us closer. When I hear people in the faith be like, all of my theology is settled, I'm totally 100% settled, I'm worried, because I was like, if everything is settled, the relationship is ended. And it's the same thing in a marriage. So I always tell people, you're never going to understand them, because guess what? You don't even understand you yet. You are an entire complex universe. There is so much more to you than you know, and you actually have to see yourself first. when you can see yourself being yourself, you can finally change. You can't really do it until you see, until you see who you are, until you see how you're wired. So for most people, they start by trying to understand their type. Like we have, a free test. There's a lot of free online tests. I always say, take those with a grain of salt. They tend to be around 50 to 60% accurate because when we're taking them, we're not being observed by a person and its personality. So just understand that a lot of times when we're taking those, we're answering what we think we should be. But I still say find your type first, because you're going to start to go, oh, that's what other people see in me. This is who I am. And I've had friends who saw it and walked away from the Enneagram for a year because that's like, I don't want to see that. That's too much. That's really hard. But you have to start with you, because until you've done some of this work, you don't know the operating system that's driving you.
Well, let me ask you this, because the first time I did the Enneagram, I went through a year of embarrassment. I was embarrassed. And that's when when I later learned, I was like, okay, then I'm probably locating geographically, I'm on the continent of my type. Mm-hmm. This isn't so much a strengths finder as it's a sin finder. It tells you where your motivations are and where they'll go if you don't grow.
Yeah, I think this is where you'll go if you don't grow is a fair warning. But I do think that there is an emphasis in the Enneagram that focuses a little too much on the low side, the shadow side. Like this is your struggle. And your struggle is your core interrupter. It is not your core identity. So, you exist as a 3 in the heart triad. So with the 2, 3, and 4, you have types that identify a lot with like sadness, shame, and they say that that's the core emotion. I call that the core interrupting emotion, because your core drive is actually love. The truest part of you is not your sadness and shame. The truest part of you is not the part of you that gets in the way, the part that is embarrassed. Sometimes we see that and we do feel this sense of like, oh no, that's not what I want to be. But I always tell people like zoom out, because the truth is the deepest part of you is not the shame, it's not the sadness. The truest part of you is love as a heart type. The truest part of you as a head type is faith, which is the capacity to move forward when you do not know the outcome. The truest part of the bodies is not anger, it's peace. So it's understanding that there is a deeper core of you. It does show you the shadow side, but it should also show you the light. Because when you pursue the truest self, the part that you don't want, it tends to start to fade to the background because it's not as powerful. It's not, I always tell people, the best of you is permanent. The worst of you is temporary.
That's so good. Well, let's take that, because I think a lot of couples get that point where they feel hopeless, and they're not. So right. Walk us through, you're sitting down with a couple in deep struggle. Mm-hmm. Where do you begin with the Enneagram, and what aspects of the Enneagram are most helpful in that context?
The most helpful thing is to realize that you are not me. It sounds so simple and so obvious.
I think that's liberating. Yeah.
It can be liberating, but it's also, so, I mentioned, my wife and I, when we would run into a conflict when we were first married, I want to talk about it, I want to work through it, and I want to do that right now. She would take her journal and her Bible, and she would go into some other room and be like, I'll be back. And she'd go back there for 2 or 3 hours to process. And I'm just being like, you're avoiding this. This is wrong. Like, what's wrong? I don't like that you're doing this. But then she comes out, she's like, I'm ready to talk now. I'm like, but I'm over it now. Like, what were we talking about? I don't even remember. So understanding that like you don't approach things the same way. And later I learned to value that, because I realized that she's a 9, so she's a self-forgetting type. She can see from every perspective except her own. So she has to withdraw to return to herself before she can come back and communicate with me. So just understanding that you are not me and that there's nothing wrong with that. Because here's what most couples run into. I understand me, and when I'm in a conflict, when I'm in a stressful situation, that's where your Enneagram type really rears its ugly head. That's where it really shows up. And when, like, you developed your Enneagram type as a defense mechanism, it was a strategy for survival, and you needed it. And so when stressful situations come up, you have two different people trying to operate from two different strategy systems, trying to attack the same problem. And that's really, really hard. So people, yeah, people have to understand that first and foremost. So when I sit down with a couple, like, I start with the you'll never understand each other and why that's good news, because then you can actually have the curiosity to understand where the other person is coming from. And it's really type specific. So I often joke with couples, I was like, you tell me any two numbers and I can tell you every fight they're ever gonna have. Because there's certain reoccurring themes that happen in every couple.
What is the most common challenge that you see with couples today, and how does the Enneagram intercept that, and then and the application becomes curative, it becomes restorative?
The most common thing is, I think you're wrong. When it comes down to it, like, think of the divisive nature of the country, the culture happening all around us right now. And why is it? It's because we moralize our perspective, we moralize our type. And so anytime you come into one of these situations where we have to navigate something together, we go, no. So one of the most common things you see in relationships is, the way I look at it is, every relationship has an anchor and a sail. Like, the boat is the relationship, but every relationship has a sail. One of these people who tends to play the role of wanting to get us moving, get us going in a direction, out on the sea, out into adventure, to have this life. And one person is the anchor. They keep us grounded, keep us rooted, give us somewhere safe to harbor in the storm. And so many of the relationships I see, there is this, they're trying to solve a problem, but one wants to, like, get going and move, and one's like, we need to pull back, we need to slow down. So one of the most common things I see in a lot of relationships is this conflict between the person who is the anchor and the person who is the sail. The person who wants to be rooted and grounded, and one person who wants to, like, go and push forward. These are the kinds of things that you see a lot of the times. But behind all of that is just that the simplest realization that, you know, if you're a type 3 and you are married to a type 9, you have someone who's a really go-getter. You have someone who's intense, who's driven, who wants to work long hours, who's looking to achieve. And you have someone who's very calm, who wants to pull back, who wants the cozy home is a bigger priority. That's where more attention goes. The biggest fundamental language around the Enneagram, we use this phrase all the time. Where attention goes, energy follows. Whatever you pay attention to, you put your energy behind. And the most common thing that couples struggle with is their energy and their attention go in opposite directions. This person, they're nothing like me. I'm so fascinated by them at the beginning. They're so wonderful and amazing, right? Oh my gosh, look how wonderful and amazing this person is. They have these gifts that I don't have. They have this capacity that I don't have. And then the longer we're in the relationship, we hit a point of conflict, and then you're like, why aren't you doing this like me? It shifts, and we lock in. But there's one other thing I think is super important right now for the families in your church. We often are approached by couples for couples coaching, my wife and I, who have small children in the home and often 2 jobs. And they're wondering why they're struggling to relate. And it's because they have a logistics-based marriage. their whole relationship is around having to function, being functional. And so there's no time for the curiosity, for the, who are you? How did you experience that? It's like, just solve the problem. And that's the problem. And I solve it this way and you solve it this way. And why are you doing it that way? And you should be doing it this way. And I'm moralizing my type and my perspective. And we get exhausted. And the very relationship that used to bring us energy is now pulling some, because we're pulling against who they naturally are and who we naturally are. That's it.
So for you, what are the ones, top 3 or 4 numbers matches that feel sometimes like they're more from hell than they are from heaven?
So I don't think of a particular number but there are combinations that require a greater amount of health to thrive. They tend to struggle with that a little bit more, but you often see this across like the triad. So you have the heart triad, like I am what I feel. You have the head triad, I am what I think. I'm in my head a lot. And you have the body triad, I am what I do. And for some people, like, you're so focused on what you do, but you're just missing people. You're missing the whole reason we're here of connection, right? So it's a little extra grace required when you're having that kind of thing. And the person who I want to do, I'm a body type. I just want to go and achieve and do. It's about what I do. And the head type is like, but we have to understand it. We have to think through this. We have to process it. And the person where you have a lot of extra grace required, the person who wants to go is like, you're slowing us down. Why are you asking so many questions? Why are you using so many words? You're exhausting me with so many words. And the other person's like, you're exhausting me with so many feelings. And the other person's like, you're exhausting me with all you want to just push and do. And I need to pull back and think and understand this. Yeah. Are we hitting right now?
So you are, and I tell you, for Sherry, fortunately, the 3 is the most balanced. What's the hope here, Jim? I mean, you have couples who are listening to this today in SouthBrook's building and in their pajamas across kitchens all over the place, in pain, but there's hope, right? There's hope.
Oh, there's so much hope. You know, I grew up in the church world, and I remember hearing from pastors early on, you know, marriage isn't supposed to make you happy, it's to make you holy. And it's one of those things that sounds so religious. It kind of, you feel obligated to believe it, but after a while, it's like, I just don't think that's true.
Well, I think a lot of people then go, then I'd rather be happy than holy. You know?
Exactly.
I mean, that's what it is. Like holy sucks. I don't want holy. Yeah. I mean, I think it's what people do. I'd just rather be happy then. I'll let God deal with the holy part, but
Yeah, and I think because eventually we're not going to be able to, like, that's like trying to hold and strain a muscle. Like, eventually it's just like, I can't let go. You know, it's too much try. My hope, honestly, is that people's relationships are a wonder and a joy. It's supposed to be a joy. When I talk about the role that my wife plays in my life now, it does bring me to tears, because the wisdom that she exhibits, the honor that she brings to our home, the love and the care that she gives that we've learned to develop over the 18 years we've been together, it just moves me, because it is a wonder to me. I am in awe of it. When you actually see the other person, you can be in awe of them again, of what you felt at the beginning. At the beginning, you had a sense, like, this person is something I'm not. They have these gifts I don't. And so you are kind of in awe at the beginning, right? And then the familiarity, we lose that awe. And you need to become more like me as we run into all these stressful situations. But I'm like, zoom out, go deeper again. There is more wonder and there is more awe. That person is way more fascinating than you ever thought they were at the beginning.
Well, I'd heard this years ago, and that you're going to reach a stage, if you keep working and growing, that you'll say, I would take this over the fluffy romantic days of early on. And it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
You know, she's a gift because she's different. And I don't say that out of us. I say that out of Christ grows that. It's substantial, isn't it?
Oh, it's absolutely. But you have to be willing to see that person. Like what you just said proves to me you see her. You don't see her as you'd like her to be. You see her as she is. That is the movement of health. And that's what I think so much the Enneagram has done for me. Like I told the story at the beginning, and was what I see with so many different couples is they understand, oh, this is the gift that you have. This is the way that I always talk about hacking your type, hacking your partner's type. This is how I can hack your type so I can help bring out the best in you. And then there's this like game I get to play where I get to try and figure out like, ooh, how do I help you in this regard? Yeah. Because it's wonderful, because you are a wonder, and you've forgotten it too, which is why I really warn people not to spend so much time on the shadow side of the Enneagram. Look at the gifts. Yeah. You think this is the true you, this negative side? Zoom out, buddy.
I hope people really hear that, because I know I made that mistake early on. I did. I focused on the corrective shame, very shame-based system I grew up in. So I grow to that. A lot of my threeness came out of trying to prove my worth.
I want to warn anyone who's in the church, you are more susceptible to that than those outside. There is a lot of this shame-based culture that I think the church is starting to wake up to and go, like, this is not the solution. Because shame is so sneaky. It gives the illusion of moral advancement without any of its benefits. So it tells you if you feel bad enough, you'll change, but we don't. We change when we pursue our light, the light of Christ that is in us, as we say. Like that is the truest part of you. The truest part of you is that you are the part of the body of Christ. The truest part of you is that you are a holy creation, that you are fearfully and wonderfully made. That is the truest part of you. Everything else is what has been interrupted. It's been added on. It is not that you're going to the core and you're going to find what is wrong. You go to the core and you're going to find what has been beautiful and holy at the center of you. And if you get to the truest and deepest part of your partner, that's what you find in them as well.
Tell me this, like for me, I see this is the journey of pain is worth the experience of love. And I'm not just talking about love between a spouse, but also the love of Christ. You grow in love. You learn to love better because you have a fuel that you didn't have.
And it's interesting, we really want to love the other, but it's impossible to fully love the other when we're constantly shaming ourselves. Whenever you hear someone really speaking harshly to another, I just go, oh my God, how does that person speak to themselves? This is something that is, outside of the Enneagram, I think one of the reasons we were able to go as a couple to this is because we had a couple rules when we got married just to build the foundation of honor. So there was two major things we had heard a pastor and a therapist meeting with a couple who said, he sat down with his couple and the woman said, I just wish he would treat me like a Denny's waitress. He's so kind to Denny's waitresses. And this idea that we would treat someone, a stranger, with more common courtesy, respect, and honor than we would the person we share a life and a home with. For us, we were like, no, we are going to have that baseline of courtesy in our interactions. We're not going to raise our voice to each other. We're not going to be harsh to each other because we know that is going to shut us down. And it's not like it's never happened. We've been married for 16 years and we've been together 18. But we see the other person shut down and we go, oh, I don't want that. I don't want this person to shut down. And the other main rule that we had is if we are having a conflict, we make physical contact. So anytime we had to have any kind of a conflict together, we would make sure that we were touching either hands, arm around each other, hug, some kind of physical contact because it breaks down the defensive mechanisms. You're less argumentative if you're in physical contact. And so those kinds of things, I think, set some of the foundation to where we could see each other's type and honor that a bit more.
where can someone go to get more help? Where's the step from this? Because I would recommend that some people go running to those, not jogging.
We started out as a podcast and we put these panels together. So we'd have, several people of the same type, and we'd put them in a room and ask them what it's like to be them. Because ultimately the Enneagram is based on self-reporting. Who do you say you are? Because we don't want to put anyone in a box. We only want people to reveal the box they're already in to help them get out. But if you just look up Art of Growth, you're going to find the podcast. It's one of the top Enneagram podcasts out there. And you have all of these panels where you can actually learn and hear from people who are like you, and that will normalize you. It actually gives you less shame. It gives you more empathy for yourself and for the other. How many times people have written us and being like, I have so much more love for my spouse after hearing those other people talking about what it's like to be them and their type. And you can reach out to us for coaching or anything else. So there's a lot of resources there. And of course we have we're in our 6th season of the podcast. So there's so much resources there. But the one thing I would really warn against is information is not transformation. Because you know something doesn't mean jack until you can embody it. You really can get it in your soul and in your practice. So you're going to have to go through understanding the information and then, hopefully getting inspired by it and seeing what's possible for you. Then transformation can finally happen. That journey is what we want. And that's what I want for every single person who's in this series. Y'all, be a part of this church. Be involved with the community. That's going to do wonders for your relationship. Being involved with something that is beyond you. I think that's really important too.
Today, Jim, you just spoke into us. What's the sermon in a sentence?
I think the thing I found myself coming back to reinforce today is simply this thing of this person is not like you, and there's nothing wrong with that. The best of you is permanent, and the worst is temporary. So this is what I would want to leave you with. So if you would, my friends, take a breath and remind yourself that you are here. I pray that you would hear this as a prayer and that you would know that this is the deepest part and the truest thing for the relationship around you. You've heard it said, love is blind. But truly, I tell you, true love is never blind. True love is the widest gaze. To be truly loved is to be fully seen. Love's eyes are wide from seeing a perpetual, unknowable mystery in the wondrous other. Love exalts the most praiseworthy aspects of the other and is a shelter for the wounds and weakness of the other. True love has a clarity to its excitement and a stability to its thrill as it rearranges the world of what has been. Its maturity reawakens the vibrancy of youth. It is the holiest kind of naive optimism. True love is of divine origin. Therefore, it must reflect the ever-expanding experience of the intimately mysterious. Grace and growth, my friends.